Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and we've got some big updates here when it comes to quality of life for alts and some massive buffs to underperforming specializations. So if you're living under a rock or you didn't just stare at Twitter like I did to see updates in real time to bring them to you here on the YouTube channel, Torghast is going to be account-wide. This means that once you complete Layer 8 on a character, Layer 8 will be available to all of your remaining alts, so that you don't need to go through the slog of 1 through 8. This is, I would say, one of the most common complaints for Torghast. It was a personal complaint for myself, so I'm very happy to see this. This definitely makes the alt experience a lot better, and it also lets me personally determine what I think I'm capable of in Torghast without Torghast artificially telling me, no, you need to do Layer 1 because we say that you aren't good enough to do Layer 2 yet because you haven't done it, even while myself personally think I could overcome the challenge of a higher layer and start working towards that legendary faster without having to go through all the tedious lower level grinding. So this is a very nice quality of life change. Might have been a little bit too late would be my only complaints, as a lot of players have already been going through it if you are one of those on your alts to try and catch up and get all of that soul ash for your legendaries. But in my mind, it's better than late than never. It's not incredibly late. It still means that Twisting Corridors will not be account wide, so you'll have to complete through all the layers of that on your own on each individual character. But that makes sense because Twisting Corridors is supposed to be the real challenge of it. And I don't think on a freshly dinged character you're going to be bothering with it unless you really want to do some sort of like Iron Man challenge or something for that. When it comes to account-wide things and alt-friendly features in the expansion, though, at the moment, I think for PvP gearing, one thing I would like to see, back in Legion, there was a currency that you could use. It was like Blood of Sargeras. There was a vendor which allowed you to box it up and then send it to an alt, and that allowed you to catch up your alt on a lot of activities. I think applying that logic to currencies in PvP or PvE, although PvE doesn't have immediate access to that type of system, PvP like Honor, having a vendor that I can go to on my main and buy a box of Honor. I'm going to lose some Honor in the exchange, right? It's not going to be efficient to do it, but my main character is now capped on Honor most of the time, unable to spend it. I would like to send it to my alts to be able to start gearing them up a little bit and catch them up, because that is still quite a long process, thousands and thousands of Honor to upgrade the gear, even if you cap out and get the 200 item level conquest gear. That would be me living in my beautiful perfect world, but I think that would be a nice step towards making it more alt friendly when it comes to PvP. Do I think it'll actually happen? Probably not, but I just wanted to give my own personal suggestion there for things I thought could be making the expansion more alt-friendly. Now let's jump into the buffs. This is what everybody wants to see. These are just flat-out damage buffs to a lot of underperforming specializations. These are likely targeted at raid performance and PvE, but they do have PvP implications as well. The first one, most notably, being Frost Death Knights. Moving throughout most of the patches, Frost Death Knights were just nerf, 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 nerf. I think a lot of the Frost Death Knight community were really worried about underperforming, and now finally they're starting to receive some buffs. Here you will receive just a 5% overall damage increase. In PvE, I don't think this is enough for you to trump Unholy. Unholy's AoE potential is just so massive that I don't see you competing in that regard when it comes to raid encounters. But in PvP, a 5% buff across the board where you fit perfectly into this burst damage meta is actually quite crazy. I think Frost Death Knight is going to be very happy to see this in PvP, and in PvE you get caught up a little bit, so you can kind of go at it with your two-handed frost builds and try and get some big obliterates. But as far as competitive world first rating or something like that, or MDI, I think Unholy is likely still going to trump you in just its overall consistent AoE potential. Havoc Demon Hunter, an underperforming spec in PvE, receiving a slight little buff. Probably not going to be enough of an increase that we really see it too prevalently, though. You're still bringing Darkness. You're still bringing Chaos Brand as a raid buff, so you'll still almost always want a Demon Hunter around in a raid, and maybe potentially in Mythic Plus, as they have historically been all right with their AoE potential, but with a shift in AoE capping, I think Demon Hunter was one of the specs hit hardest by that change in philosophy for dungeons overall. In PvP, I think Havoc Demon Hunter is only a couple buffs away from being an S tier specialization. So I feel like you should be pretty happy about seeing a buff, even though it seems small at this 3% margin with things like the Hunt and PvP. Demon Hunter is becoming more and more prevalent. Hunters, Beast Mastery, Survival. Your main problem at the moment is just competing with marksmanship's overall damage. This is likely to push you in a more favorable direction. This could increase the likelihood of Beast Mastery in PvE. It's going to come down to very fine number tuning that I can't give you the specifics to, but Beast Mastery is always kind of that chill vibe spec where you're just kind of sitting back, letting your pet do all the work and having a good time in PvE. Same goes for PvP. This is going to help you out a little bit. I don't think you're likely to see Beast Mastery everywhere, though, as a result of this. But if you're just dead set on playing Beast Mastery, it's not going to hurt, right? Your dueling potential in PvP one-on-one is great. This is really going to help you in that. Maybe in a couple of random battleground situations as well if you're more of a casual player. Competitively, in PvE, it may be enough. But in PvP, I don't think it will be. Survival, also receiving a 5% buff, again, competing with marksman, being ranged as a main advantage point. I don't think it's likely to push you over the top in PvE or PvP over marksmanship, maybe in specific compositions like Feral Druid Hunter and Discipline Priest. This may be enough, but healing is still quite high and durability is still quite high, as relevant from some of the deep dampening games we just saw in the tournament. So being able to compete as a hunter is going to be tough. But you're not unhappy about this. It does bring you a little bit closer, although marksman will likely still reign on top in regards to all content. Frost Mage here receiving a 3% buff. Again, competing with fire's tough. Combustion does a lot of damage in all content at the moment. We see Fire Mage very prevalent in MDI as well as PvP. And then in Raid as well, Frost was hit the hardest from Conduit nerfs prior to the expansion's release. It was actually one of the best performing specs until that point. And now it's got a bunch of stimulus buffs coming in for its base damage. I don't think Frost is at a point where 3% is enough to compete with Fire Mage's potential burst, which is really valuable in the game as a whole at the moment. Maybe in Raid, it'll even you out again a little bit closer. It's just bringing all those bottom specs up slightly, but in my mind, not enough really to topple them. You'll at least maybe not get memed at. Maybe you'll get an invite. In PvP, though, I think it's still tough cookies in PvP as Frost. Fire is just so massively insane in terms of its burst, fitting perfectly in the meta with all these cheat death effects with Cauterize and the Seed and stuff like that. Frost has just fallen pretty far comparatively to that burst damage. Now, Assassination getting another buff, and Assassination is a spec not in PvE. Outlaw's AoE is likely always going to be remaining on top. Single target will almost always go to Subtlety. You're a little bit even or closer to them now, but I think in PvE, you're not going to see Assassination everywhere. In PvP, though, Subtlety receiving nerfs and Outlaw not being a great performer, Assassination might be one of those specs sliding under the radar. So if you're an upset Subtlety rogue, not able to find a lot of groups, this 5% damage buff after a damage buff recently as well may be incentivizing you to try Assassination out. I would then again suggest you play with Fire Mage, a Holy Paladin. If you really want to mix up compositions, maybe Rogue, Shadow Priest as well. But this is a welcomed buff, obviously, to Assassination. But in PvE, competing with AoE's potential on Outlaw and single target and sub is really tough for Assassination. However, in PvP, we may now see Assassination return as the top spec, especially if these buffs continue. These are still likely, they could change as they're noted here. As Enhancement Shaman getting a 3% buff. You like this in all content. Are we going to see Enhancement Shaman in PvE as a result? It's yet to be seen. This one is, again, it's a smaller change. Enhancement's doing okay in PvE. It's not an Aflock or a Boomkin when it comes to Raid, but I'd say that it's doing all right. Although when everyone's competing and wanting to min-max everything, all right is usually not enough. So PvE might still be tough there. In PvP, I think Enhancement Shaman's an underrated spec. Getting a 3% damage buff is nice on top of your already amazing burst damage. So in PvP, making it a little bit better. PvE, a little bit better, just a nice little buff up for enhancement. Probably not enough to turn heads and get too much attention, but it's welcome nonetheless, I would imagine, for Enhancement Shamans. Warrior, now this is a class that's kind of underperforming in PvE across the board, and Arms and Fury have been receiving buff after buff, which is confusing to PvP players because Arms is doing so great in PvP. Fury, on the other hand, not so much, but because they're both getting buffed the same way, Fury just still never gets any attention in PvP. In PvE, probably not enough to shift you really over the best specs. Like we've seen a lot of Marksmanship Hunter, Balanced Druid, Fire Mage, in Raid, Affliction Warlock. I feel like this is still not enough to put you in a top position, but it definitely brings you up from feeling like you're really at the bottom. And in PvP as Arms, you're stoked about get 3% buff. I mean, Warrior is doing great right now. So in PvP, if I was an Arms Warrior, I would be very happy about this. Fury Warrior, 3% might not be enough for you. I've seen some really cheesy Death Wish builds in random battlegrounds and honor talent to stack up your damage, but you also take more damage. And that seems to be super fun in random battlegrounds, but competitive play, 3% damage buff, really not enough to put Fury on the table in PvP. And again, Fury's much like BM Hunter, kind of a feels good PvE spec where you're just kind of cleaving and AoEing down everything. So nice to the players who want to get in on that play style. But overall, I think this was a good approach, especially considering I think these changes were tailored towards PvE. It's a good approach of just slowly buffing up the underperformers rather than just slapping down all the top dogs in terms of competitive viability. So I like this approach. I'm curious to see what changes they make in the future following this arena tournament that's happening over the weekend, following future MDIs as well, and how close they can get to balancing all the specs. Again, there's always a best, and sometimes utility will be taken into account as well, but there were obviously a lot of significantly underperforming specializations, so I would like to see changes to healers. Overall, it feels like Mistweaver is getting neglected quite a lot when it comes to the entire game. So that's just one thing in general. When it comes to PvP healers, we're seeing prop paladins do better healing than Resto Druids, Mistweavers, Holy Priests. So I think the healing needs a bit of tweaking when it comes to PvP and also a little bit of tweaking in PvE. I see a lot of complaints about Spirit Shells making their return in raids, which means you can just stack up shields on your raid, and then anytime a mechanic happens, it's fully absorbed and no one needed to use a cooldown. So just stack a bunch of Disc Priests, you get a bunch of extra damage, and you can immune every mechanic. This has been the reason why Spirit Shells have been reduced in effectiveness in the past, if not removed to my memory. So I'm a bit surprised to see it come back and the same problem happens for Discipline Priest in Raid. Discipline Priest also doing amazing in Mythic Plus. It's kind of replaced Resto Druid as the meta healer at the moment when it comes to dungeons and MDIs from my personal assessment of the first week of the MDI. So there's a bit of a healer tweak that needs to go on. I'm curious to see how they manage to navigate it, because healers that are really strong in PvE, they're good in PvP as well, Disc Priest, but it's limited in its comps. It's not as amazing as it is in PvE. And I feel like this is a tough way for them to go about it in terms of balancing out the healers. But regardless, that's my opinion. Here are the changes. Love the quality of life improvements to Torghast. Would like to see more alt-friendly features, though, for Shadowlands here in terms of currency like Honor. And then I think this approach to slowly buffing specializations is a great way to go about it. And I still would like to see more changes moving forward. But aside from that, thank you very much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave it with a thumbs up. Comment down below with your thoughts on the changes here. Are you going to be trying out anything new moving forward after these changes? Are you making any alts now with Torghast being more accessible to them? We'd love to hear it. Subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. It's just going to let you know when my videos go live, and I do my best to be an accurate, up-to-date resource in real time for you all out there and give you as well of an educated opinion as I can, having played this game for 15 years and studied it for tournaments across 6-7 years, playing at a high level as well, monitoring all aspects of the game. Albeit, I will admit, I'm not as talented at PvE as a lot of other sources. I do my best to keep up on it and well-read or well-versed in studying it, although I may not participate a ton at the highest level in it to try and give you a well-rounded opinion. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.